Sanctuary of the Hospitality of Host, Guest and Stranger. And this Bible study has been written by Reverend Dr. Inderjit Bogle and Dr. Jayme Reaves, and it explores how churches can better respond to those in need of sanctuary and a warm welcome in both Britain and Ireland. My name is Richard Reddy and I'm the Director of Justice and Inclusion for Churches Together in Britain and Ireland, CTBI. And CTBI, alongside Church of Sanctuary, will be your host for this evening's webinar. I'm going to be chairing the programme this evening, and it will give us an opportunity alongside yourselves out there in Zoom land to explore the issue of sanctuary and hospitality. And we'll be doing this in the company of our authors, as well as we'll get an opportunity to hear from those who have actually experienced hospitality and a warm welcome, as well as those who have actually provided it. Now, via the wonders of Zoom, our participants this evening are from Ireland, from Scotland, from Wales, and various parts of England. Now, all of them are passionate about the issue of sanctuary and hospitality, especially within the context of those seeking asylum and refuge in Britain and Ireland. And I don't need to tell you how important this issue is, given a massive refugee crisis that now sees more than 100 million people globally displaced. And Indigent, who is one of the co-writers, will talk about more about that in a few minutes' time. Now, we want to make this session interactive, so what we're encouraging you to do is to send in your questions. There is a Q&A sort of facility. So as our speakers talk, please send in questions and we'll do our best to respond to them. We're going to start this evening's time together with a reflection from Sanctuary and Hospitality for the host guest. And that's going to be read by Sabine Chalmers, who's the coordinator for Scottish Faith Action for Refugees. And that's the Church of Scotland program. So over to you, Sabine.
Hi everyone, great to be with you, and a pleasure to start the evening by reading from this very resource. So I've chosen one, and I'll start with Hebrews chapter 13 verses 1 to 2. Let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. I'm going to read part of the reflection. Hospitality is deeply connected to reciprocity and mutuality, and we never know what unexpected gifts and challenges it may bring as a result. We know that we are not created to be alone, but instead to be in community. Often, when we talk about hospitality, we talk about feeding people or welcoming them into our space, which assumes we're talking about hospitality not only from the host's perspective, that is. But what about the guest? In what ways might the guest reciprocate and offer us hospitality in return? In the practice of hospitality, the most meaningful and transformative experiences are when the guest becomes host and the host becomes guest. We know each other when we can empathize, put ourselves in each other's position, and share in each other's experiences. If you're just feeding people in need, that is charity, which is good, but it is not hospitality, as it offers no space for mutuality and reciprocity. Guests must be given space to host as well, to offer a story, to get to know the host, to ask questions, to continue to contribute to the meal, or offer a gift in whatever form it takes. The gift may simply be a relationship or an experience that enables the host to open up and see the world through the guest's eyes. Right.
Thank you very much for that, Sabine. Our next speaker needs very little introduction to many of you. Reverend Dr. Inderjit Bogle is the founder of both City of Sanctuary and Church of Sanctuary, and he's also the co-author of this excellent resource. Indigent and I are colleagues, and I work alongside him with the Church of Sanctuary initiative. And Indigent's going to speak now, and he's going to tell us a bit more about this new exciting resource, but also about the importance of sanctuary and how churches can engage in that particular initiative. So over to you, Indigent.
Thank you, Richard. Can you hear me? All clear? Okay, I greet you all in the name of Christ and wish upon you the peace and blessings of God. It's a real pleasure to share with you. I'm sorry I was a little bit late getting in, but Thursdays and Fridays I'm on grandparents' duty. So if you hear some children crying out there, that's because they think I should be with them. So I'm speaking to you from my home, and especially to commend to you the Bible study resource entitled Sanctuary, the Hospitality of Host, Guest, and Stranger. I'm grateful to my co-author, Dr. Jayme Reaves, for her thoughtful, challenging, and helpful contribution, and look forward to hearing her later. This resource supplements the book, Hospitality and Sanctuary for All, and the aim of the book and the Bible study resource is to support individuals and worshiping communities to connect stories of travel and travail within your worship, prayer, action, and theological reflection. The Bible study resource offers bite-sized 7 days of meditations, prayers, and action points. It can be used anytime, but is especially topical for Refugee Week, 20th to the 26th of June, which ends with Sanctuary Sunday on the 26th of June. So there is a call here to prophetic Christian witness and expression of hospitality as a clear challenge to hostility. Encourage your church to explore, to become Church of Sanctuary as we come to Refugee Week and Sanctuary Sunday. There are resources available to assist you with this on the Churches Together in Britain and Ireland Church of Sanctuary website. So I'm wearing a rope as a stole around me. This is now my regular stole. I picked up this rope from a broken refugee boat that came to grief off the coast of Lampedusa. And if this rope could speak, I wonder what stories it would tell of people who were on that broken boat. A clerical stole represents the yoke of Christ. It is like bearing the suffering of Christ. This rope is now my stole, and I wear it to uphold the suffering of refugees in whom I see the face of Christ. Almost 2,000 people drowned while attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea last year. And in 1 month, 1 week in April this year, more than 100 people drowned similarly. These are facts, according to Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. And crazily, it is now illegal for NGO rescue boats to save refugees from drowning. That's criminal. People fleeing danger need sanctuary. Wars make refugees, and long-term, the only solution to the unprecedented numbers of refugees in the world is the cessation of war and conflict, a world without war. This is a clear message and lesson from the current Ukraine-Russia conflict. Looking to the future, sadly, the prediction is that by 2050, there will be around 1.5 billion people who are climate change refugees as weather becomes more extreme. So it is urgent and essential to build sanctuary, cultures of welcome and hospitality and safety. Holman Hunt's painting will be familiar to you, knocking on the door, and is knocking on the door of a soul. The door is firmly closed with briars growing over it. Okay, it's not the most inclusive portrayal of Jesus Christ, But I saw a version of this painting done by a refugee. It was hanging in a prayer room in an immigration detention center, and Christ is no longer a white blonde man. And as I sat there with people locked up, awaiting removal from Britain, I saw the painting in a new light. It pointed me to see the face of Christ in those knocking on the door of nations for sanctuary. Biblical witness carries a call for protection and safety of people whose lives are in danger while their case is processed, even if they are deemed to have committed a crime. God called on Moses to set up cities of refuge to ensure this, and in this wisdom is the root of the contemporary movement and network of City of Sanctuary, which has also led to the development of Church of Sanctuary idea. A Church of Sanctuary will respond to refugees on the basis of fact, not fiction, hospitality, not hostility, and do this as integral to Christian discipleship, seeking to embed welcome, hospitality, and safety right across the ethos of the whole church and the whole congregation. A church is a sanctuary, and the meaning of this is spelled out in the story of Abraham and Sarah offering shelter and hospitality to passing strangers in the heat of the day by the oaks of Mamre in their tent. And that story has to be kept in mind when we reflect on the meaning and message of Jesus sharing hospitality with those he met on the road to Emmaus. Here, Jesus shares hospitality in which he is a stranger and a guest and a host all at once. And this Trinity we all are. In both of these stories, those showing hospitality are richly blessed and find themselves in divine company. Sanctuary is not hospitality in which those with privilege, prestige, and power take the role of host to those without privilege, prestige, and power. We're talking about sanctuary, the hospitality in which we are all host and guest and stranger all at once. So let me say this to you. Find 15 minutes in a day, each day of Refugee Week. Use the Bible study resource to help you to reflect prayerfully on the issues which are raised. And if you want to go further, then there are ideas in the resource for deeper reflection and action and prayer. Arrange for the idea of Church of Sanctuary to be promoted on Sanctuary Sunday in your church, and get your church to give more thought to Church of Sanctuary over the next 12 months. And arrange study groups in your congregation to engage further in further reflection using the book Hospitality and Sanctuary for All, holding 4 sessions, perhaps during Advent this year or Lent next year, or maybe even leading up to Refugee Week next year, and come back to Sanctuary Sunday next year, more biblically and prayerfully attuned and informed, and commit yourselves as a church to work over the next 12 months to become a Church of Sanctuary, which can be celebrated then on Sanctuary Sunday in 2024. There's a plan of action, and you have many resources available from CTBI, and our speakers who will speak now, they will reflect this and also offer you more wisdom from their experience and thought. And if I can assist, please do invite me and be assured of my prayerful solidarity. And thank you, and God bless you for all that you do. Thank you, Richard. I'll hand over to my colleagues next.
Thank you very much for that, Inderjit, and we will be hearing from you right towards the end of the program. Next, we have the other co-writer of the resource, and that's Dr. Jayme Reaves. And Jayme works at Sarah College, and as I've said, she's co-written this resource with Indigent, and she's spoken at previous Church of Sanctuary events, and she'll talk about the biblical roots of sanctuary. So over to you, Dr. Jayme.
Thanks very much, Richard, and thanks so much to Inderjit and to Churches Together for inviting me to be a part of this this project and this resource. It's been amazing to be a part. As my own professional academic research, amongst other things, has been really interested in sanctuary. The theological and ethical things that are within our biblical tradition, but also from an interfaith perspective. So from Jewish and Muslim traditions as well, of kind of what are the resources and what's the imperative within our religious traditions that call us to protect each other, to provide hospitality and sanctuary to those who are threatened. So my contributions to the resource are primarily around well, not Inderjit does biblical work as well, but so the Cities of Refuge and particularly the gifts that each other brings are the places where I tend to spend the majority of my time. Protective hospitality, I would define as this provision of hospitality, so that, you know, we talk about hospitality as kind of sitting at a table together, and that's part of it. Absolutely, table fellowship is really important, but also the provision of sanctuary, where you take people in, you provide protection for them. Inderjit referred to the Genesis 18 text where Abraham welcomes the strangers, but then those strangers go somewhere else and they are brought in, and certain sacrifices are made by the family, in order, Lot's family, in order to protect them. And that was part of the biblical culture, and the imperative of shame is on you and your family if you don't protect the people who are guests in your home or in your community. And so the lack of hospitality is the sin in that case. And so the work that I do is around this idea of the provision of protective hospitality. So communities who put themselves at risk, perhaps, to protect those who are under threat. And as Inderjit was talking about, the Cities of Refuge, fantastic resource within our biblical tradition that offers us a vision and imagination about what that looks like, to make sure, even down to, you know, the cities need to be within quick distance to each other and not too far away in case somebody needs to get there very quickly. They need to be easily accessible. There needs to be provision for the people who come to those places, and offered protection until their case is heard. So the resources are there if we take them seriously. And so it's just so important for me to be talking about this, to be thinking about this. The research that I've done within kind of post-conflict communities, so in Bosnia and in Northern Ireland as well, Croatia and Serbia are places where I've done work, and hearing the stories of people who have been protected, who have been taken in, as well as those who have actually done that work, who have provided the protection, the sacrifices that everybody makes in that context, but also the way in which their lives are changed by those relationships, by the ways in which the sanctuary movement and the states and others who are really going above and beyond to provide protection for those who are in need, is really important. So it's an honor for me to be a part of the work that's happening here in the UK and in Ireland as well. And so I would love to hear about questions or comments or anything that anyone has related to the resource, related to what they think hospitality includes. The work I do now tends to be around with churches and kind of thinking about what is hospitable practice in your context, how can we be making it more effective and leading toward more transformative change for our communities, both as guests and as hosts. The reflection that Sabine offered at the very beginning is this idea that there's this dance between being a guest and a host, and often it's easy for us to be thinking about the provision of hospitality as if we are the ones that are in control as the host, but we need to be guests as well. So thinking about how that happens in the context of Jesus's stories, where he sits at a table as a guest and then becomes this host in this space, are really good examples of where we can also learn and practice. So I have plenty more I could be saying, but I'm going to stop there, and I'd be happy to hear any questions or have any further discussion later on.
Thank you very much for that, Jayme. Wonderful. That was wonderful. And also on time. Brilliant. Exactly what we want. Questions have come in, and I would encourage all you out there in Zoom land listening to this to please don't be bashful. Please send in your questions. I'm sure what you're hearing, just like me, is, I'm finding this very stimulating. So please do send in your questions. Towards the end of the program this evening, there will be a Q&A session. Next, we have good folk from Stories of Hope and Home, and they're a Birmingham-based organization who work with people who are seeking asylum. So we have with us this evening Stephanie Neville, and she will introduce some of the work that she's doing, but also introduce one individual in particular with whom she's working. So I'd like to hand over to you, Stephanie, and if you could sort of tell us a bit more about the work you do and introduce us to Mika.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Steph, and I'm here with Mika. I'm not a sanctuary seeker, but I count many people who are among my friends, and I'm here with Mika, who is one of those people. She's keeping her camera off because this is being streamed, and however much we might talk about welcome, not everyone feels safe yet. So that's a choice that she's made. So you'll just have to trust me that she's a very beautiful young woman, and she would really like to find the perfect red dress. So Mika, can I hand over to you? Can you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Steph. My name is Mika, and I'm from Birmingham. And I have been in Birmingham more than 6 years. It's become part of my my life. I create my friends, and Stephanie is part of my family. So and at the moment I'm still an asylum seeker, still in the process to become a refugee. Well, especially with the new bills and the things what is going on right now, it's quite hard to be hopeful, but I'm always try to fight for my rights.
Mika, do you want to tell, you've been in Birmingham for 6 years now. Do you want to go back to the beginning and tell us a little bit about your experience of first arriving in the UK and how you were made welcome or otherwise right at the beginning?
Well, first time when I arrived, I landed to London without any knowing where I am. I wasn't aiming to come to this country. It was just for some sudden, I found myself in here. And when we apply, when I try to register into system to have some card officially, Home Office didn't really want to accept me for some excuses or reasons, and because of my lack of knowledge and language, I couldn't convince myself, and I was around a month or something staying outside, and through the organizations that are charities and people who was really feel pity on my situation helped me to reach the Home Office again and register myself into the system.
Because you were very young when you arrived, Mika. What was it like arriving as a young person?
I was 18 by that time, and because my parents always was responsible on me. I never did any like paperwork. I never speak with like big people when I was child. So, and when I just find out myself, there is like no one who will help me and talk behalf of my name. So it was quite hard for me. So I was quite terrified and had a really huge stress, didn't know what to do, where I should to go. So I was totally lost by that time.
But then you got to Birmingham, which we all know is the best city.
Yes.
Others may disagree. What have you been your experience? You've been here 6 years now. What have been your experience of feeling? We're talking about welcome, sanctuary. What have been your experiences of feeling welcome and feeling unwelcome? What things have helped make you feel welcome, and where are the places where perhaps you felt less?
Well, I will start with the not the best part, where I wasn't unwelcomed. It's I would say it's more governmental stuff, like where's the Home Office, Migrant Help, circle different like organizations who work with Home Office. I don't know what was the reasons why I wasn't like feel welcomed. Maybe because of my status, because I wasn't refugee yet, because of my lack of education, and because I was like lonely in my first year, like in my couple of 2-3 years. I mean, first years was so hard to. By that, like in my first day, I didn't have no one. Like cause I couldn't speak in English. I didn't know where I need to go, like as a charity, Red Cross, different sanctuaries to looking for like help. So because I was just by myself, and no one is guide me, or no one is told me like didn't give me the instruction what I have to actually to do, to for example to get specific paper or letter, for example. And even my lawyer wasn't really helpful, despite the fact he was in my side and he's supposed to help me. But it was feeling like he works with Home Office. He's like lawyer of Home Office person, not mine. And every time when I have any like payment issues or different issues related to my case, I was always like feeling kind of guilty. In fact, it wasn't my fault. End of the day, it was the systematic problem. But whenever I was mentioning their fault, like if they did some mistake and I proved that, they wasn't like even apologizing or like how to say, not receiving their like I never feel myself as a human in this system, to be honest. Like I was just labeling as asylum seeker, which was making me like I'm not into valuable person, not into community. So that's what the system makes me. And I was really in like my first 2 years upset and angry because of this. But by the time when I find staff and different like group of people who had the same experience as me, I felt like I'm not only person who going through this experience and facing these kind of hard challenges. And so it was now in a good part, there was a people who always was trying to support me, help me and guide me to find like to support me, always be next to me, not only with my immigration case, also being like as a friend when I need just talk to with someone and share my like own problems. So that's what I felt when I arrived not straight away I felt in Birmingham, but like after a while, so when I built my so far life, I created friends and find organizations. I felt like Birmingham become my home because of those people, not the Home Office.
So you're talking to a group of people who are interested in the idea of creating spaces that offer sanctuary. What difference do those things, those people who you've said you built friendships, you had charities supporting you?
Yeah,
it hasn't solved all the problems of the Home Office. But what difference does it make in the midst of? And we know the Home Office situation is getting more and more difficult for people.
Yes.
Does it still make a difference to have those people on your side?
It still makes difference, because when I had the very, very hard time related to my case, I was receiving so many calls and positive kind of vibes to telling me I shouldn't give up, I shouldn't be upset, that they are here for me. And like, it was simple support. If they even can't afford like the big help or advice, they was just telling me they are here for me, and they will listen me. So this already makes me this already makes a big difference. And I mean, in the case when there is no one to help you emotionally, and you have hard challenges with home office, you can totally drain and lost yourself. Even people can have a mental problem and have thinking about the suicidal thoughts. But with the community, with the people who really care about you, it can little bit give you a hope that there is not that you are not lonely here.
Ika, we've got a couple of minutes left. What's next? What are your dreams for the future, for you, for Sanctuary in the UK, for How Welcome work?
So my big dream is become a lawyer, hopefully one day. It's first of all to know my rights, to basically protect myself. And secondly, once I will be officially qualified as lawyer, I believe I will be able to help the people and guide them, people who like migrants, immigration, asylums and refugees, who maybe will have the same experience which I had. So I also would like to change the system, like not the change, obviously it's really hard, but improve at least in a better way, especially with the new immigration bill, nationality and borders bill. I mean, it's really frustrating every asylum seeker as well. Once it's passed. So I mean, obviously before that, we will, as a team, as a charity, maybe I will try to do my best to reduce the chance to send the people to Rwanda. That's what my aim and my goal.
Okay. I think it's time for someone else to take over. Thank you, Mika,
thank you so much
contributing. I think yours is a really important voice to hear in these conversations.
Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mika in particular, but also Steph, for the work that you do there at Stories of Hope and Home. And it's important to actually hear firsthand from those individuals who are going through the asylum system, to hear their stories, because that's where the rubber hits the road. We've heard from someone who is going through that particular system and who has sort of been the beneficiary of hospitality and welcome. And we would now like to hear from our next speaker, who is Reverend Canon Elaine Murray, and she is a Church of Scotland vicar, and she'll tell us more about the work that she's doing in Carragline in Cork in the Republic of Ireland. So over to you, Reverend Elaine.
Thank you very much, Richard. I first of all have to begin by saying I'm a rector in the Church of Ireland. I'd be shot if I let it go that I was Church of Scotland. So I'm a rector in a medium-sized Church of Ireland Anglican parish in the south of Ireland. We're about 20 kilometres from Cork City, on an estuary of Cork Harbour, which is a lovely kind of urban rural mix. But our area is becoming more and more built up as it moves from being a small village into what is more or less a satellite town of Ireland's second biggest city, Cork City. I first heard of the Churches of Sanctuary movement in late 2020 when I attended an online event organised by the Reverend Abigail Sines, who is the Dean's Vicar in Christchurch Cathedral in Dublin, and she's a leader in the Churches of Sanctuary movement in Ireland. The event itself was about planning ahead for World Refugee Week and Sanctuary Sunday, and actually Inderjit himself spoke very movingly that time about the just published Hospitality and Sanctuary for All discussion guide. It had an immense effect on me at the time, and I registered my interest. And around that time, I'd also spoken with Damien Jackson, who is the chair of the Irish Council of Churches, and he encouraged me and my parish to become involved. A couple of months later, in February 21, I had an email from Father Kevin Mascarenas, who is a presentation brother based in Cork. And he also is heavily involved in the Churches of Sanctuary initiatives. And Kevin formally invited my parish to think about becoming a Church of Sanctuary. Based on all that I had heard, I felt that this was something that was very much in keeping with my parish's own understanding of what it was to witness to Christ in our world. We were already a fair trade parish since 2012. We had become an eco congregation from 2014, and we'd become an open and welcoming parish to LGBTI people in 2017. So I knew I was pushing an open door by suggesting to my parish select vestry, that would be the parish council, that we now explore the steps in becoming a Church of Sanctuary. Following discussions, my select vestry voted unanimously to formally sign up to begin the process of becoming a Church of Sanctuary. And in June 2021, we signed the Churches of Sanctuary Statement of Commitment and began our journey. In this last year, we have tried to learn more about issues to do with sanctuary, from theological understanding to actually listening to those who have been through the process of relocating to a new land. We had Fiona Finn, who was the then CEO of NASC Migrant Rights, come and speak to us in the church on Sanctuary Sunday in 2021. And this Sanctuary Sunday, we're going to welcome Sister Jo McCarthy, who was the founder of Cork Migrant Centre, and she'll come and speak to us at the end of the month. We've been involved in various initiatives to do with refugees and migrant rights, so painfully highlighted in recent months by our Ukrainian sisters and brothers. Myself and my neighbouring Roman Catholic parish priest had already set up an ecumenical project team to look into the Unhcr community sponsorship scheme back in 2019. And this, of course, had involved several people from both of our parishes in the plight of refugees, as we went through the long and difficult process to help a family relocate in our area. And of course, COVID-19 didn't help at the time. But the Al Rahal family of 5 are here now a year and have settled in well. And this coming Refugee Week, my parish will host a photographic exhibition in the parish hall of photographs taken by the family showing their journey from war-torn Syria through the refugee camps in Lebanon, finally settling in Ringaskiddy in Cork Harbour. So at this exhibition, while we are the hosts, we will also be the guests. So that's very important, I think, tying in with the resource that we're talking about. Along with other items, we collected and organised for unused sewing machines to be distributed in the nearest direct provision centre in Cork. We've also helped with seasonal needs like back to school, Christmas and Easter. In recent months, my parish have been involved in collecting items for the Red Cross for distribution to incoming Ukrainian refugees. There's been about 35,000 Ukrainian refugees in the last 2 months. And together with 2 neighbouring parishes, we helped to clean and kit out a house for an extended family coming to settle from Ukraine. Myself, along with some of my parishioners, attended the excellent What's the Story? Lives in Direct Provision, which was an online event for Christchurch Refugee Week in 2021. And we listened to 5 powerful and personal stories told through poetry and images and spoken reflection from individuals who are currently in or who had been through the international protection process in Ireland. The Sanctuary Network has also organised 2 trauma-informed pastoral care seminars in April last year and May this year, which were a wonderful example of what the Sanctuary Network can provide to small groups around the country. The network also shares wonderful, useful resources with us. For example, the excellent God With Us, which had worship resources on the theme of refugees, migration and sanctuary. In that particular resource, there are short scriptural reflections, suggested points of discussion, prayers and other suggestions. I think it was prepared by the churches together in Britain and Ireland in partnership with other churches and organisations. As a busy working rector, I found these kind of resources particularly helpful and useful. And from that one, in one of my sermons, I was able to tie in the story of Ruth with the larger story of current immigration attitudes, especially combating the idea that it's all one way, you know, that refugees cannot add to the community in so many diverse ways. The network in Ireland here also organises useful gatherings of sanctuary and faith colleagues. And these small group gatherings kind of give everybody an opportunity to share where they're at in the learn, embed, share process, to ask questions, to swap ideas, or especially important, to enable us, those of us who are located near each other, to organise to meet in person and to collaborate on upcoming activities. During the last year, we have tried to use our parish social media platforms to promote various activities and to be a voice for the voiceless refugee population in our locality. In my diocesan synod coming up this Saturday, a fellow clergy person who is the chaplain to the university in Cork, which is in itself a university of sanctuary, he's going to propose a motion urging that all parishes in our diocese think about becoming a church of sanctuary. I'm seconding that proposal, giving concrete examples of what it might involve. So to end, I have great hope that there will be a growing network of churches of sanctuary in my own diocese and in the country in the coming months and years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. I don't know where I got the idea that you were a Church of Scotland rector from. We did speak beforehand and you clearly told me you were Church of Ireland, so apologies there. But what you do sense is lots of interesting things going on in Ireland. And one of the great things about the Church of Sanctuary movement is that it's working across the 4 nations. So next up we have with us Aled Edwards, Reverend Canon Aled Edwards, who's the General Secretary of Cateen, which is Churches Together in Wales. And Aled will give us a snapshot, an idea of what is taking place in Wales around the issue of sanctuary and hospitality. So Aled, over to you, sir.
Thanks very much, Richard. It's a joy to be with you all tonight and to hear these wonderful stories. I think probably from my point of view, the place to start is when in 2001, asylum seekers were placed as remand prisoners in Cardiff prison. We began a process of campaigning for them, and that really lit the candle of the new devolved government in Wales beginning to work alongside churches and third sector organisations to campaign for asylum seekers. And at the time, we began to develop a link as Churches Together in Wales with a number of charities, one of them Displaced People in Action, where we started very early on to do pioneering work with refugee doctors. And I'm now told that since then, since 2001, 2002, we've trained something in the region of about 260 doctors and dentists who have been enabled now to work in the NHS. But I think for tonight's conversation, I think the powerful story that we have is the one that Inderjit will remember from many, many years ago when he came down to Wales to speak to us of the concept of Wales becoming a nation of sanctuary. And I think that has become a very powerful emblem. It's taken a while for us to get there, but it's been immensely powerful. That has gone beyond the churches to the Interfaith Council for Wales, and also to a whole array of third sector organisations working together to form a national agenda in Wales that is very distinctive and very different. And I've already spoken to some of the initiatives, but that has helped us over the past 20 years, that whenever we've gone at the open door of working with the Welsh Government in particular, what we have found is that the branding of Wales as a nation of sanctuary has meant a great deal and has become now very much self-defining. That's the way in which it works, and it works very powerfully. Richard will know that one of our latest endeavours began in earnest around the fall of Kabul in August. And we worked alongside the Welsh League of Youth, an organisation called the Urdd. It's the largest youth organisation in Wales, with a membership of around 60,000 children and young people. And I tweeted something around what is the meaning of Wales being a nation of sanctuary in that context. And the director of the year, the lovely lady called Sian Lewis, and you've met her, Richard, in the CTBI when CTBI came down to Wales. She asked, well, can we use our resources here, not only just to give people accommodation, but also to give them a wraparound plus, as I call it, that you do provide the basics of education and health and care, but you also provide community. And what we did within a matter of days, it took some time to convince the Home Office, but with the Welsh Government, with veterans organisations, and also with sector organisations and the local authorities, we eventually persuaded the Home Office that we would host about 110 Afghan individuals and families in the premier property in Cardiff, which is the Millennium Centre. And we housed them there. And the aspect that was most significant there, I think, is that we hosted, I think, about 68 children and young people. And they stayed there for about 4 or 5 months. And that gave us a sense of being unique, I think, in this dynamic. I'm not aware of any of the other nations or indeed anywhere beyond the UK actually giving its premier youth organisations and its resources to the task of looking after refugees. And it was a humbling, it was a pleasant experience. And it takes me back to the earlier conversation that we had. What we discovered was that people like me, I guess, have set out to make sure that people are welcomed well in Wales. But what we discovered with that scheme was that we were being welcomed by the Afghan families, and they've become friends and they've become close to us. And my guess is that those friendships will last forever. I do smile at it a little bit that we took them to see Wales play football, both the men's and the women's team. We took them to see Wales play rugby. And I like to think that it may be angels looking after us, but those two teams have done really well since they've been welcoming to our friends. And that is a very powerful story that they tell, that they've been welcomed and they've enjoyed our sport. We just have to tell them that it's not normal for us to do this well, and they may be disappointed in due course. But that has been a crucial model maker for us, that when the Ukrainian war began to send refugees into our midst, what we decided in Wales was that we would adapt that model and seek to provide, I think, what the Welsh Government now calls, with the Scottish Government, who've got a similar model, to call a super sponsor. So what we've done is that we've set up in Wales a number of welcome centres. And again, the Welsh League of Youth has been very good in helping that to happen. And we just yesterday actually were called by the Welsh Government, those of us involved in their stakeholder groups, to check out what was happening. And the reality is that the super sponsorship centres have been so successful that we cannot now physically receive anymore. 5,668 applications were made to host Ukrainians in Wales. And the super sponsorship scheme welcomed in 2,453 into that Welsh Government scheme. And that is immensely powerful. And the model is ongoing and we are learning with it. And that flowed from the sense in Wales of being a nation of sanctuary, a concept owned by the churches, initiated by us, but now embraced as a national identity. Indeed, when we went with the IR, the Welsh League of Youth, recently to Norway for their peace and goodwill message, they've been giving a peace and goodwill message for over 100 years now. The First Minister spoke powerfully of how Wales is now defined as a nation of sanctuary. And that for us has now become very different. And this happens to bless individual lives. In the Revd National Steddfod, which is our singing and dancing and cultural festival, last week, and the churches always have a presence there, 113,000 people visited that festival, and they were delighted to receive the Afghan friends and their families into that event. And it really struck us emotionally, and my final word on this, it really struck us powerfully as churches involved with that engagement last week, that when the Afghan families came, one of the young girls said when she was going home, "This has been the best day of my life." We cried a little when we heard that, and we were deeply moved by that. And the reason for that, of course, is not that we have welcomed them, but they, in a very real way, have welcomed us. And for me, that is, in a sense, the meaning of us being a nation, a sanctuary. And I'll try to keep on time, Richard. I hope that's okay.
That's excellent. Well done, sir.
Yeah.
We are very much on time, which is good. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our next speaker, the Reverend Gerard Goshawk. A couple of years ago, actually 2019, I had the pleasure of attending Six Ways Baptist Church in Erdington in Birmingham for the service that they had when they became a church of sanctuary. It was an amazing service. And with us this evening is Gerard, who will be telling us more about the work that they do at Six Ways Baptist Church and why they became a church of sanctuary. So Gerard, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Richard. Obviously, one of the main amazing things about that occasion was the guest speaker, Richard Reddy. Yeah, why did we become a church of sanctuary? Well, in part, we were already doing it. That's one reason, not in a big spectacular way. We're just a fairly ordinary, not massively politically switched on, not particularly liberal, not particularly this or that, really, sort of a church. But we're outward looking, and we had always been proud of being a church that was welcoming. And so the outward looking aspect and the welcoming culture that people seem quite proud of, that seemed to add up. And as well, being in a location where we just have, because of where we have people come to us because we're in Birmingham, in an area where there are lots of people who are seeking asylum and people who are new settling here, who live, and so people turn up. So we have the issue forced for us. So we undertook this process, and it culminated in 2019 in us becoming a church of sanctuary. And in terms of how that is now for us, it's who we are. And I think that's really important in keeping that alive, because it's possible, isn't it, that you might become a church of sanctuary. I hope that if you're not already, that people representing churches and meetings would do that. But you know, that you kind of get the award and then you just put your feet up, and or maybe forget about it a bit, or it becomes something that you did back in 2019 or something. A new issue comes along. So it's about trying to keep it alive and reminding ourselves that that's who we are. I think that's really important. And hearing, you know, what's happening in Wales, for instance, just sort of been part of the political and religious culture in Wales. This idea of hospitality, of having that embedded, to come back to one of those three sanctuary principles that there are embedded in who we are. So we have a constant thing of reminding ourselves that we are a church of sanctuary. So me as the pastor, just to make sure that it's there lots of the time, not all of the time, so people don't just think that's all that he goes on about. And to have that running through just in a balanced way, the things that we do. And to kind of big ourselves up, that we take pride in being people who welcome the stranger, and so that's who we are. And then as that grows, it naturally grows. So for us, we've been blessed with having a number of people who have come to us either whilst they have been seeking sanctuary, or that's their story, and so that becomes us in that way as well. Thinking about what Jayme was talking about hospitality and the true nature of it in a balanced, reciprocal kind of a way. So just trying to do all of these things all the time and keep that balanced approach going, of convincing ourselves and of convincing the church that that's who we are, reminding ourselves again and again and again, and running through everything that we do. And what we have found is that it grows. It grows. You have to be intentional about it. Again, it's a balancing act of being intentional about it. And that's part of that's this declaration that that's who we are. But also then it just becomes natural, that's just who we are and what happens. And that's great. And it just grows and grows and develops. I was looking at some of the questions in the chat, because I have to go from the meeting in a moment or two when I finish doing my bit. I'm sorry, but I noticed that one of the questions was, how does it enrich? How does it, being a church of sanctuary, enrich the church? I can't think of any negatives since we have become a church of sanctuary. I can't think of one single negative, but we have been blessed because we have been more intentional and more natural about including and involving and becoming a church where there is no division between the asylum seekers and the people who are the host community. That those lines have become blurred. It's become a real joy, and we celebrate each other, and that's absolutely wonderful. Another question is, what difference does it make to be a church of sanctuary? Well, clearly there are some of the differences for us, but I think in the community, some of those differences are that because we've declared that that's who we are, then, and because I mention it a bit, I don't go on about it all the time, then people get to know that. And so, I've had an email today from a local school and the local vicar, where the local church school are interested in becoming a school of sanctuary. So because, and so those connections are just formed, and you get to know those people who you can network with, and different organizations come to use our church who are working with asylum seekers and refugees. And there's sort of all sorts of opportunities like that arise. I'm currently in the process of being part of a team to organise a meeting with our new MP, and going into a local school that is already a school of sanctuary, to talk about the horrible legislation that there is in place now and what we can do to fight back against that. So it's really simple, it's really joyful, and it's a mix of intentionality and just being natural, of that being who we are. It is who we are as people of the book, that we are people of hospitality and welcome. And it's not, it's not joy all the way because of the pain that there is involved in the all, as we've heard from Mika, but there is also joy there too, as we continue the fight together. I'll finish there.
Thank you very much for that, Gerard. Go well. I know you can't stay for the entire duration of the meeting, but go well. Thank you very much for your contribution. I know firsthand of the sterling work that you're doing at Six Ways, and I commend that, and I would encourage those of you out there in Zoomland to take a leaf out of Gerard's book. Just to say, we are sort of coming to the end of the kind of the sort of talking aspect of the program, and what we will be doing next is to put the questions as they are to panelists. Just to say, from a Churches Together in Britain and Ireland perspective, CTBI that is, we are very much behind the Church of Sanctuary initiative. CTBI were alongside Indigent the initiators of this imaginative and transformative program, and we do commend it to our supporting or sponsoring churches in Britain and Ireland. We can see how much of a difference it is making on the ground, and we would encourage our churches in Britain and Ireland to become churches of sanctuary. And we also would like to commend this particular resource to the churches. As Inderjit has pointed out, it's available on the CTBI website. It very much is a resource that can be used, particularly during Refugee Week, and as Indigent has pointed out, that's from the 20th to the 26th of June. But I would also say that, as long as there is a refugee crisis, as long as there are people out there in need of hospitality, well, this resource is something that you can turn to that gives you a clear idea, biblical sort of underpinning as to why hospitality and sanctuary are important. It does give you a scriptural, the scriptural basis for taking action to make a difference in the lives of some of the most vulnerable and marginalized people currently in our society. Okay, so I'd like to move on now to questions and answers, and we've got some questions that I will put to the panel. Some are sort of specifically tailored to a particular panelist or to a few panelists, but I think some are more generic. But alongside that, we've also got some sort of comments in the chat, and I'm not sure if our panelists have had an opportunity to look at what's in the chat, but I will put that to folk as well. So we've, we can ensure that, all the questions that and comments that have been made, we get an opportunity to discuss them. So we've got quite a bit of time on our hands to do that. So let me go to the first one, which is, well, there was a question actually, I think it was slightly answered by Ali, but I think it was for you, Jayme. And it was about sanctuary and hospitality, and do the other faiths, what do the other faiths, particularly the Abrahamic faiths, say about hospitality and sanctuary?
Gosh, we don't have time to answer that fully because there's so much actually that is said. But within the context of the Abrahamic tradition specifically, there's something there's a commonality that's informed by the geography from which the religions came. So there were cultural what's the word I'm looking for? Cultural influences, I guess, that because basically when you lived in that kind of environment, to not welcome people into your tent was to consign them to death. So there was an ethic that was a very practical way of needing to live. Plus, you had people who, traveled in kind of more of a nomadic style. So you've been surrounded by your tribe for weeks on end, and finally this new person has come along and they're bringing news, and they're so there's so much that they can bring as well. It's fantastic though. Islam and Judaism, I think it's still very much around in its culture as a religion more so than Western Christianity. Now, I think there's a difference. I think Eastern Christianity does have more of an ethic of hospitality in the way in which it talks about it. But so much about culture that I think is informed in Western culture, hyper-individualism, and the ways in which we operate now just makes hospitality less of a value that I think we can learn so much more from Judaism and Islam. Islam's practice of, the story is welcome someone into your home and feed them and take care of them for 3 days before you even ask who they are. It's just don't bother about who they are. You take care of all the other things they need first, and then you offer that. And Judaism has a real sense around honor and preserving one's dignity and being, and we see that throughout the Hebrew Bible as well. One of the questions or things that Gerard was saying around reminding ourselves who we are, that repeated phrase, remember, you were once strangers in Egypt. You do this because this is who you are. And so the communities that I've worked with, it's so much about identity. And when we ask them, why do you do this? Their answer is, well, wouldn't anybody? Isn't this who we are? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? And it's just kind of almost is a non-question. But of course, we're aware that plenty of communities don't. So yeah, there's so much out there. Not to shamelessly plug my book, but yeah, Safeguarding the Stranger goes through kind of all of those various aspects within the Abrahamic traditions where we do have common faith and common practice and cooperative action that can be done to support this work.
Thank you very much for that, Jayme, and it would have been remiss of you not to plug your book. Just to say, where can one get hold of your book?
Any book retailer. It's Whiff and Sock. It was published in 2016, but still available. Amazon and Abe and wherever else you'd like.
I think what we'll also do is to have a link to your book from.
Sure, I can put one in the chat if that's useful.
Yeah. If you would do that, that's
sure.
Fantastic. So we've also got some other questions, specifically about Church of Sanctuary and how it works. I think, Inderjit, if you could unmute yourself. So one of the questions is, how long does it take to become a Church of Sanctuary? And the other question is, what's the difference between Church of Sanctuary, say it from a Britain and Ireland perspective, and how it works in the United States, for instance? So if you could take that, particularly the first question, how long does it take to become a Church of Sanctuary, and then the compare and contrast between Church of Sanctuary in Britain and Ireland and the United States. So over to you, Indigent.
Thank you. Can I start by saying thank you to all those who've contributed this evening. Thank you, Sabine and Jayme, Stephanie, Mika, Elaine, Aled, Gerard. A real rich mix of all that's been shared, story and experience and wisdom, and we're all really blessed by all you've shared. In terms of how long, honestly, I want to say to you, don't worry about that. It's not about how long. Actually, the important thing is to engage with the issue and to get into the process and to make sure that as Gerard was saying, he didn't want to be the person who's seen as the one who goes on about it all the time. I think the way to avoid that is to make sure it's a whole congregation engagement. Don't leave it to one or two people who are passionate about it. So make sure, firstly, that that's what embedding is about, that you involve the whole of the congregation. Those of us who are ministers, preachers, leaders, we can talk about it, preach about it, make that our business, but we should make sure that we engage the whole of the congregation, the whole of the worshiping community. And also, if you've got other people using your premises who are not worshiping with you, but who use the premises, involve them as well. Make sure all those people who come through the doors of your building are committed to this. The church where I'm help out a little bit in ministry, there's two different congregations. Make sure that both of the congregation, if you've got different congregations, get them all on board and thinking about it all together. And one way to do that is to get them looking at the issues, the Hospitality and Sanctuary for All book, the material which is there. Get groups going, discussion groups, house groups, study groups, get them all to look at the issues so that the whole of the congregation is informed of the issues. So don't worry about the length of time. Take as long as it takes to make sure everybody is on board and it's not a project of one or two people. I said in my presentation that what a church can do is take Sanctuary Sunday as an occasion at which, if this is not an issue already, to introduce it and to say, over the next 12 months, we're going to study the material and the resources, really get into this. So work on it over 12 months, involving the whole of the congregation. And then the following Sanctuary Sunday, you could then say, okay, we've done all this work. Next year, here is one piece of action we will take. We will look at what it is to be a church of sanctuary and begin to get people to talk about that. Then come back the year after on Sanctuary Sunday and say, look, where are we up to? You know, so there's 2 years. So I'm saying it's not about a short process, it's a long process, and the focus should be on process, and the process is about engaging all people. It's not a tick box exercise, do this and do this and do this, but it really is about making sure people live by facts, not fiction, to embed the concept of sanctuary in the whole culture of the church, and to do it loudly and proudly. And as Gerard was saying from his experience, and Elaine as well, that this actually is an example to others. It encourages others and it spreads the vision, and that's a really important part of what it's about. So that's my answer to the question, how long. I mean, don't worry about the how long. Get into the issues, think it through, and involve the whole of the congregation. Okay, and it's the same with the City of Sanctuary. And a lot of people say to me, how long does it take to be a City of Sanctuary? Well, don't worry about that. You know, it's not a race, it's not a competition. It's about engaging with the issues and getting to the point where it really is part of our ethos and identity. Okay, so I'll just say that at this stage, and we can engage with that important question more if we wish to. On the USA, UK, Britain and Ireland situation, I think the main thing to say is that in terms of City of Sanctuary, sanctuary cities in the USA, I mean, Jayme can say more about this, but in some ways, in the USA, it's become a political thing, really, in the sense that you know you are sponsored by your state to be a sanctuary city, and finance is involved and so on. So you're in a way co-opted by your city. But in Britain and Ireland, we've tried to keep it out of the political scene a little bit, and Aled might have more to say about that. But it's not about so we don't get funding from government, certainly not in England and Scotland and Ireland. We are a voluntary, you know, faith-based initiative and movement, and that's important. I think it's we don't want to be co-opted by politics. My concern is that if, in terms of politics, if one party says, oh yeah, we support this, the other party will definitely say we don't support that, you know, because that's what politics is about. So keep it away as much as you can, and get faith communities involved with it. Let it be a faith-based initiative. And I did like what Alid was saying about it was initiated by the churches, and it's now part of the national identity, and that's good. That's how it should be. It's a faith-based, involve all the, okay, initiated by churches, but it's an all faiths issue, because all faiths value hospitality and sanctuary for all.
Thank you very much for that, Inderjit. Now, there are some questions in there that are directed towards Elaine, Alid, as well as Steph and Mika. But before we go to those, I'm just wondering if we could sort of quickly address some comments made by Warren, David Haslam, and Susan. Warren mentions the Ukraine refugees are being rightly welcomed into Britain, and then he says at the same time it seems as though Afghan refugees are being forgotten, many of whom are still in hotels with seemingly little immediate prospect of homes. Does anyone want to sort of jump in and respond to that, give sort of take on that particular point?
Richard, may treat all refugees equally, irrespective of nationality, ethnicity, skin color. Treat everybody equally.
Yeah,
Excellent. Ali, do you want to?
Yes, I wouldn't agree. I couldn't agree more with Inderjit on that one. I think those of us that were long in the tooth of working in the sector, and many of us are now, will have spoken at the time of the fracturing of how people are viewed when they come here. And we've now got a serious problem in terms of the spontaneous arrival end of things. And the worst of that, of course, is the Rwanda system, which I think personally is truly evil. And I think that then gives us a degree of different nationalities, different processes, different structures that view those claiming sanctuary in our midst differently. And from a Christian point of view, I'm sure that Inderjit and others would agree with me here, there can be no difference. It is a very denial of our faith when we differentiate between Greek or Jew, or indeed any other nationality. And we have to care for all. And I think that is one of the major things that we need to press, and we do in Wales very much in terms of the human rights dimension here, is that we have to remember everyone who comes here and to make sure that they have safe passages and that they are treated well. And I think that is a paramount principled thing that the churches must do. And I think, you know, we will be at the forefront of that, but it is something that matters a great deal, that we don't differentiate, because God doesn't.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Alid. You mentioned Rwanda, and one of the comments made by David Haslam sort of looks at that issue of Rwanda, and he says, how much should we be trying to prepare our churches for the willingness to offer sanctuary in the face of Home Office hostile environments, efforts to remove people seeking safety here, including Rwanda. Steph and Mika, you mentioned the hostile environment and Rwanda during your sort of tete-a-tete conversation. I'm just wondering if you would sort of want to give us your views on both the hostile environment, but also on the government's Rwanda plan.
Mika, do you want to say something?
Yeah, well, just add a few sentences. I'm totally agree with Alet, who mentions like a pure evil scam about the sending, like assuring the people to Rwanda, like it's anti-human thing, and I mean, they taking the rights of people to stay, whether like if their choice to come here or not. They have a right to say they want to stay in this location, for example. And when the Home Office try to send them to the Rwanda, it's kind of another stress and mental like issues, because people like traveling in hard circumstances. They traveling by the lorry, covering under like car or by boat and different things, and obviously they don't have a choice, ask for government, receive like legal way visas to be able to come here. So obviously they persecuted, like they have some like reasons why they coming in that way. They don't have any choice. So, and the what Home Office, I mean the Priti Patel shown to media, like there is a two type of refugees will be like good refugees and bad refugees. It's very, very, very unfair, and like no one choose to stay in this country, like struggle for 10 years, for like, I don't know, even more than that, for no reasons. If their asylums and refugees are here, they are obviously had like struggles, and that's why they are here, and they're looking for a safety place. And by sending them to Rwanda, it shows like they do the opposite thing. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
I think the thing I would add is when we're thinking about how we respond to the Rwanda scheme, some of that is thinking about directly, well, what do we do if we meet someone who's been threatened with Rwanda, and how do we offer sanctuary to them? But I also think my experience over the last weeks is this is not just affecting those who've been told they're going to Rwanda. This is having a huge impact on the mental well-being of a huge proportion of the asylum seekers currently in our country, who are either directly fearful of being sent to Rwanda or who are just feeling this sense of being a bit less welcome than they were already, not feeling welcome. And how do we, whether it's someone who's due to be sent to Rwanda or at risk of being sent to Rwanda, or whether it's someone who isn't, how do we compensate for those increasing messages of hostility and lack of welcome? Because my goodness, there's a lot of compensating to do.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in there? Okay, if not, we can move on. There were a couple of questions for you, Elaine, looking at the church in Ireland, and also Gerard did answer a particular question, a couple of questions actually, on you know, how being a church of sanctuary can enrich your church. So if you could, Elaine, just mention, you know, give your sort of perspective on that, but also there's a question about where are the refugees from in Ireland, and I'm sure they mean specifically Cork, for instance.
Yeah,
if you could
throughout the country. Well, first I would echo what Gerard had to say about you know, the whole process. It enriches us as a congregation, and what Inderjit was saying about not being specific time. We've only begun the journey. I mean, we're on the journey a year, but we're only kind of as a congregation really engaging. The fact that we're kind of outside of a big metropolis kind of affects us as well, in that we don't really have too much that we can do, but we can change people's hearts and minds. And certainly what we were saying earlier on about the Ukrainian refugees, you know, and people feeling undervalued, who have been here for years. Certainly what I would hope, the way we're changing hearts and minds in congregations, I would hope that the way Ireland have opened their hearts to the Ukrainian refugees, I would hope has a knock-on effect, in that, you know, a heart once opened won't close up again as quickly. And I do think that, you know, it hopefully it can bring good rather, but I understand how people will feel devalued if they've already been in the system. The question about where are refugees from in Ireland, I quickly Googled while somebody was talking there, very bold of me. But in 2020, refugees, which would include the Unhcr processes, the first country was Syria, had the most, followed by Zimbabwe and then Iraq. And then on asylum seekers, the first country was Nigeria, followed by Zimbabwe, Georgia, Somalia, and Pakistan. And then obviously in 2021, the top country for refugees will be Ukraine. And just a statistic that I picked up there while we were talking, in Ireland, with a population of 5 million, we've welcomed 34,000 Ukrainian refugees in the last couple of months. Whereas in the UK, with a population of 67 million, there was, I think, 60,000. So it has had a huge effect on Irish society, you know. So hopefully, as I said, hopefully hearts are opened and good will come of it for everyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, particularly the statistics. It's always good to compare and contrast what's taking place with Ireland as opposed to Britain. And that's what we're seeking to do with this particular sort of initiative. It's to sort of see what's happening in both Britain and Ireland. Now, I'm mindful of the time. Time does march on, as they say. We've kept to time. So what I would like to do is to hand over to Indigit. And Indigit, if you could just speak for a couple of minutes about future activities, and just, you know, just to sort of top and tail what you've said previously about Church of Sanctuary and the resource, and then I will wrap things up. So over to you, Indigit.
Thank you. Well, a word of thanks to everyone again. Thank you everyone for making the time to be here. I'm sure all of you could be in about 3 other places tonight. Knowing the kind of people you are and the demands on your time, we're honored that you've chosen to spend a bit of time with us. I think the important thing now is to encourage people to use this resource. It's a okay, Jayme and I worked on it a bit, but I want to say it's actually a good resource. Okay, and it's worth using for personal meditation, and to link it to other resources which are available. So I do want to encourage its use as widely as possible. It's really about equipping people to help us to realize it. Um, I, I think it was you, Elaine, who said, this is part of what it is to witness to Christ. This is integral to our Christian discipleship. That's what it is um, to express Christ likeness. And my theology of it really is from Luke 24, where Jesus is all in one, a stranger. That's how he appears. He becomes a guest, is invited to a meal, and takes up the position of host. And in his humanity, he's all three. That's the Trinity in him. And in my experience in church, actually in my 45 years of life in church, I can say to you, I am a stranger still, and I am a guest still, and I am a host also. And all of us at all times, we are exactly that. So it's not about us doing things for others. It's about recognizing that we're all strangers and hosts and guests, and we're all pilgrims together on a journey. And it's right at the heart of scripture, Hebrew and Christian scriptures, that we're passing by. We are pilgrims. We are all strangers. We're on the way to a new place, and we do what we can to make a difference while we are here. So please use the resources, and use the Churches Together in Britain and Ireland Church of Sanctuary website. We are at the beginnings in some ways. I mean, I think Ireland, what's happening in Ireland is immense, and in Wales, it's so encouraging to the others of us. And I do think we can learn a lot from Ireland and Wales particularly, and from work in Scotland. England has a lot to learn from the other three nations within Britain and Ireland, and we're grateful for your contribution, and for the way you are leading us and teaching us and showing us the way. I'm really impressed with what's happening. Thank you. So we are in many ways at the beginnings of a movement, so there is much to happen. What I'd like to see, Richard and all my colleagues gathered here now, is that over the next 12 months or so, we'll organize one or two other gatherings like this. What I'd like to do is to gather a meeting like this, perhaps a webinar, which will be about the nuts and bolts of being a church of sanctuary. A lot of people are saying, what does it mean and how do you do it? And we'll do that. We'll look at that. And Richard and I, working with colleagues in Birmingham, to put together an event, a national event for England. We've done this a little bit in Scotland and in Ireland and in Wales, but nothing has happened in England yet on a national scale. So we're trying to put one together. I think it will happen next year, probably in Birmingham. It's not going to happen in Birmingham this year because there's a lot going on with Commonwealth Games and so on. So look out for details on that, and we will be in touch with you. And just my final word, Richard, to say to all of us of all the different denominations, get your national assemblies, your conferences, which will be coming up, to look at this, and do what you can at your decision-making bodies to get them to take this on board, and to encourage all the local congregations to share in this work. It is supported by churches together in Britain and Ireland, so it's not a kind of a sideshow, and it's not a private initiative. It's a CTBI initiative, and with all the member churches of CTBI, we should be making sure in our decision-making bodies we take this on board. And we people on this screen here, we're the kind of people who are going to make sure that happens. So and I look to you for that, and thank you for your contribution. So Richard, that's me, and I want to finish with the prayer, but let me know when that would be appropriate.
Okay, then. I'll tell you what, Inderjit, I just want to say thanks again to all our speakers, and I'll call out their names. So, you know, those who participated this evening have been Sabine. She's no longer with us. She had to leave. Well done, Sabine. Inderjit, thank you as well for all your inspiring work on this. Thanks also, Jayme, for your input. Always invaluable. Mika and Stephanie, thank you very much. You know, you spoke at Churches Refugee Network at the Churches Refugee Network meeting previously, and that was also very inspiring and encouraging. It's good to hear about hope, because I think that's what people need in those situations. They need hope. Elaine, thank you very much for all that you're doing in Cork as a Church of Ireland rector. Let me get that right. And Ali, it's always good hearing from you as well, sir. And Gerard had to leave us, unfortunately, but he's doing some sterling work there in Birmingham. So just thank you very much. Thank you very much to our good folk out there in Zoom land for all their questions. Apologies to those who questions we couldn't answer for good reason. And I'd like to also thank my colleague Mike, who has been doing all the spotlighting and all the back office, important back office activities to ensure that we've had a smooth and I would say very business-like, professional-like webinar. So Indigit, I'll hand over to you and then we will close.
Thank you. Well, bless you all, and thank you for all you do, and all the strength of God to you. Let's close with a prayer. Holy God, you are our refuge and shelter. You take sanctuary in us. Strengthen ourselves to be people of sanctuary, to build cultures of welcome and hospitality, and to act with protective care for all who are in need of sanctuary. We pray for a world without war, in which all can live safely and without fear in their own homes. And we pray that you will make our efforts to build a better world fruitful. In the name of Christ. Amen.